This is what kings and emperors feared the most. Not armies, not plagues, not rebellion, but the sound of hooves in the distance. That thunder meant one thing. The Mongols were coming. They didn't just fight wars. They erased civilizations. When Genghis Khan marched, he didn't bring mercy or negotiation. He brought a new kind of warfare, one where cruelty was a weapon and fear was the message. But among all his horrors, one act stood out. Even in a world already soaked in blood, it was seen as something that went too far. After conquering the mighty Khwarezmian Empire, Genghis captured the prince who had betrayed him, a man named Inshallah Khan. And instead of a sword, he chose a punishment so symbolic, so calculated, that it shocked even his own men. He didn't spill the prince's blood. He poured molten silver into his eyes and ears. It wasn't just to kill him. It was to send a message that echoed through centuries. A message that said, "Your gods cannot protect you. Your royal blood means nothing. Even your soul belongs to me." This wasn't random cruelty. It was psychological warfare, a terrifying masterpiece of dominance. This is the story of the Mongol machine of terror, where fear was the sharpest weapon of all. Imagine being trapped inside your own city. No food, no water, no way out. You hear the Mongol horns echoing beyond the walls, but they don't attack. They just wait. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months. The bread is gone, the wells are dry, and the smell of death starts to hang in the air. This was one of Genghis Khan's favorite strategies, the siege of starvation. He understood that hunger was more powerful than any sword. Why waste men in battle when desperation could do the work for you? Cities like Nishapur, Merv, and Herat learned this the hard way. The Mongols surrounded them completely, cutting off supplies, trade routes, and even rivers. Inside the city walls, panic spread faster than disease. People began eating grass, rats, and leather. In some chronicles, survivors confessed to something darker. They ate the dead. And that was exactly the point. Genghis didn't just want to conquer you, he wanted to break you. He wanted the next city to hear what happened and surrender before he even arrived. It was fear as a military strategy, psychological warfare on a mass scale. When the gates finally opened, there were no heroes left, only hollow-eyed survivors begging for mercy. But the Mongols didn't believe in mercy. Everyone was executed. Men, women, even children. The few who lived were forced to tell the story of what they saw. That's how terror spread faster than any army. One city's screams became the next city's warning. To the Mongols, starvation wasn't cruelty, it was efficiency. Why fight 1,000 men when you could let hunger kill 10,000? It saved arrows, soldiers, and time. And it created something far more powerful than victory. It created legend. Because once you've seen what starvation does to a city, you don't fight Genghis Khan. You surrender before he even arrives. Now imagine this. You've just watched your town fall to the Mongols. The screams haven't even faded when their generals bark a new order. You, your family, your neighbors, everyone still alive, are rounded up, chained, and marched toward another city. But you're not prisoners. You're weapons. This was Genghis Khan's most ruthless efficiency, the human shield. At the siege of Gurganj, thousands of civilians from conquered villages were driven ahead of the Mongol cavalry. Old men, women clutching infants, terrified children, all forced to march straight into the arrows and catapults of their own countrymen. The defenders on the walls looked down and saw familiar faces, their friends, their families, and realized with horror that to protect their city, they'd have to kill their own people first. Swords and bows. They fought with morality. They knew that the deepest wound wasn't physical, it was emotional. By turning victims into shields, they made every arrow the defenders shot an act of self-betrayal. Can you imagine the chaos, the guilt, the hesitation? That's when the Mongols struck. The moment the city's will cracked, they unleashed their army with terrifying speed. Chroniclers like Atamalik Juvaini wrote that the Mongols used the people of one city to batter down the next. It wasn't just cruelty, it was a grim kind of logic. Fewer Mongols died, more cities fell, and fear multiplied. When news of this reached other cities, many didn't even try to fight. They'd heard the stories. The Mongols don't just kill you, they make you destroy yourselves first. In that sense, Genghis Khan had discovered something darker than any weapon: the power of conscience. He weaponized guilt, forcing entire populations to collapse under the weight of their own humanity. Because how do you defend your home when the enemy makes your own people the first casualties? Now picture this: a captured prince once draped in silk and jewels, now kneeling before Genghis Khan's generals. His wrists are bound, his face pale but proud. He's the son of a king, a man raised to believe his blood is sacred. But today that belief is about to be shattered in fire and silver. This is the story of Prince Inshallah Khan, heir to the Khwarezmian Empire. His father had betrayed the Mongols, killing their envoys and raiding their trade caravan. For Genghis Khan, this wasn't just an insult, it was a challenge to his entire authority. And Genghis didn't forget. When he finally captured the prince, he decided to make him an example that the world would never forget. But here's the thing: Genghis didn't want to just kill him. That would be too easy, too ordinary. He wanted a death with meaning. So he ordered molten silver, the very symbol of wealth and greed, to be poured into the prince's eyes and ears. Think about that. The metal that had once bought the prince luxury and power became the instrument of his agony. His eyes burned first, the same eyes that had looked greedily upon Mongol lands. Then his ears, the same ears that had ignored the Mongol diplomats' pleas for peace. And there was another layer to this horror. No blood was spilled. Among the Persians and Mongols, royal blood was considered sacred. Killing a prince without spilling it was seen as a way to bypass divine punishment. Genghis had found a loophole, a way to kill a king and insult his gods at the same time. It wasn't just an execution, it was a statement, a declaration that even the sacred was no longer safe. The message spread fast, faster than his armies. It said, "Defy the Khan, and your gods can't save you. Your wealth can't protect you. Your bloodline means nothing." And in that single act of molten silver, Genghis Khan proved that fear itself was his most valuable weapon. Now imagine standing on a battlefield, sword in hand, facing an army so terrifying that even the wind seems to hesitate. You take a step forward, and then you freeze. Because right there, between you and the Mongols, you see your own people, women, children, elders, tied together and pushed ahead as living shields. That was Genghis Khan's strategy: cold, ruthless, brilliant. When the Mongols attacked fortified cities like Nishapur or Herat, they often captured villagers and slaves from nearby towns first. But instead of killing them, they forced them to march in front of their armies, absorbing the arrows and stones of their own defenders. Imagine being inside those city walls. You climb the tower to fire your bow, but instead of enemies, you see familiar faces, the people from your neighboring village, your cousins, maybe even your friends. Do you still shoot? That's what broke defenders. Genghis Khan understood psychology better than anyone of his time. He didn't just conquer cities, he crushed their will to fight. It wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. Every time a city resisted, tens of thousands died. But when word spread that the Mongols used human shields, panic came first. Many towns surrendered before the first arrow even flew. Historians describe moments where defenders threw down their weapons, crying, begging for mercy, knowing resistance meant watching their loved ones die in front of them. Genghis knew exactly what he was doing, turning empathy into fear. And that's what made him unstoppable. He didn't need the biggest army or the most advanced weapons, just the ability to turn a soldier's heart against itself. Because in a world where mercy was weakness, Genghis Khan weaponized humanity itself. By the time the battle ended, no one could tell the heroes from the victims, only that the Mongols had won again, not just with swords, but with psychological terror that echoed for centuries. When Genghis Khan finally died in 1227, you'd think the world would breathe again, that the nightmare would end. But no. His death didn't stop the storm. It only gave it new generals, new maps, and new victims. The Mongol machine kept rolling. Cities that once dared to resist vanished from history. Entire regions, from the Middle East to Eastern Europe, carried scars that would never heal. Even long after the horses stopped galloping, the memory of Genghis Khan remained a living threat. His name alone could make cities surrender without a fight. Think about that. A man so feared that decades after his death, people would still open their gates at the mere rumor of his return. That's not just military power. That's psychological immortality. And here's the dark irony. For all his brutality, Genghis Khan also connected the world in ways no one had before. Trade routes revived, cultures mixed, ideas flowed. But they all did so through rivers of blood. His empire became the foundation for global exchange, built on fear, fire, and bones. He taught the world a brutal lesson, that fear could last longer than walls, and terror could outlive empires. Centuries later, soldiers, kings, and dictators would study his tactics, not just how he fought, but how he made people surrender before the battle began. So, the question is, was Genghis Khan a genius or a monster? Maybe both, because history doesn't always separate brilliance from brutality. Sometimes the two ride the same horse, across deserts, through cities, and straight into the pages of eternity. And even now, when you hear the name Genghis Khan, you don't just remember a conqueror. You remember the man who made the world bow, not just with swords, but with fear itself.